Okay. This morning, we're going to take a break from 2 Timothy, and we're going to look at a topic that I've heard quite a bit about over the course of the last couple of weeks. I was just going to put this in the announcements. But then it just started getting bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and I figured, well, okay, I'll just turn it into a sermon. And then I thought, oh no, I don't want it to go more than one. So there's a lot of this I'm going to be moving along on and not getting that into depth, because I don't want this to take a month and a half. I want to be able to get it done today. But I want to talk to you about the mark of the beast. There's a lot of conversation about that. Some people think it's this, some people think it's that, some people think they could accidentally take it. And the point of this morning is to get the point across that this is not going to come to you by accident. You're not going to accidentally take the mark of the beast. That's not how it works, and I hope to be able to prove that. Now, the mark of the beast is mentioned over in Revelation chapter 13, and we're going to look first at verses 16 through 18, because that zeroes in on this thing called the mark of the beast. Revelation 13, verses 16 through 18. And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he have that he had the mark, or the name of the beast, or the number of his name. Here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man, and his number is 666. Okay, there's the mark of the beast. Okay? That's basically the whole mention of it. Is mentioned as a mark and some other things that we'll look at in some verses later. But this is the outline of this thing called the mark of the beast. I want to start this with the absurd, and then we'll get into what it really is. I'm going to show you what it isn't, and then we'll get into what it really is. There are a few recent and past things that have been deemed the mark of the beast that have turned out to be false. Now, I'm older than a lot of y'all. Some of you weren't even around when some of this stuff first started. But the first one that I remember was when I was a little boy in the 1950s. And this was called the mark of the beast, the Social Security card. Now, granted, it is in my right hand, and there it is on my forehead. But they decided that this was the mark of the beast because they were numbering everybody, okay? Let me show you a little bit of how absurd that is. You know who gets a Social Security card? Citizens and people with green cards in the United States of America. Now, I love my country, but I got to admit, we're not the entire world. We're just a small part of it. The United States, the red, white, and blue is not the entire world. Not everybody gets one of these things, right? The U.S. covers 1.87% of the globe's surface, of the Earth's surface. We have 4.2% of the world's population. But we tend to think that what goes on here is what goes on everywhere, but it isn't. So this is clearly not the mark of the beast. And it's not on you, and it's not a graven thing. It's just a number so that they can keep track of things. By the way, this is my original one from, I don't know, 1912 maybe? Okay, then, give you a little history lesson here for those of you that don't know. Back in the 1920s, department stores and oil companies like Chevron and Texaco and such started issuing charge cards to people so that they could charge gasoline or pay for clothes. Now, a charge card is not a credit card. A charge card is a card that I've got a couple of them in my pocket. I use them to pay the expenses of the church with. And when the statement comes in, you pay it off in full. You don't have to pay any interest on them, but whatever you charge on it, it's due when the statement comes along. And that's how things used to be with the gas cards and with the department store cards. So if you used one of those cards, as soon as the bill came in, you paid it off. In 1950, the first general charge card was issued, and that was the Diners Club card. I don't know if any of you remember that one or not, but you could actually use it in more than just one place. Where if you got a Chevron card, you can't use that at Texaco. Well, you might be able to now, but back then you couldn't use it at a different gas station, right? If you had a Macy's card, you couldn't use that at Dillard's. Well, Diners Club was the first one that was invented that you could actually use somewhere else. In 1958, American Express came out with the American Express card, which is a charge card, and Carte Blanche came out. I think Hilton Hotels owned them. They came out with a general charge card. Bank of America came out with the first general credit card, and it was called the Bank AmeriCard. And Bank of America is a California corporation. As it started to become more popular, they started licensing other banks to issue the Bank of America card, or the Bank AmeriCard. And then there was another company, I forget who it was, that came up with what ended up being the Master Charge Card, and then eventually became MasterCard as we know it today. These are credit cards. These are they're not charge cards, they're credit cards. So you could carry a balance on them. In 1976, Bank of America decided to go international with their Bank AmeriCard. So they changed the name of it to Visa. They changed the name to Visa. Now, Visa is an interesting word because when you travel to another country, what do? You get a visa. So with them going international, not only that, I don't know if you know this or not, but I think just about, if not all of them, just about every country that uses our alphabet pronounces the word Visa and spells it the same way that we do. So it was a brilliant marketing scheme by Bank of America to come up with this thing. But there were people that decided that the Visa card is the mark of the beast. Okay? Why is Visa the mark of the beast? Well, here's what they said. They said that the VI, right? VI, that's the Roman numeral 6. And the S stands for the Greek letter sigma, which is also 6 in Greek, in Byzantine Greek, not modern, but in Byzantine Greek. And that the A is the Babylonian character for 6. So 666, the Visa card, mark of the beast. Okay, well, I will admit that the Roman numeral VI is 6, and that in Byzantine Greek, not modern, but in Byzantine Greek, the sigma was used as the letter 6. But the Babylonian 6 doesn't look anything like the Babylonian A. Now, back then, you couldn't check things the way you can now. You didn't have the internet. How are you going to go prove that this Babylonian, most people don't even know where to go find a Babylonian alphabet or a number chart. So, and if you want to write a book and make a bunch of money off of this stuff, you don't care. You're just going to say whatever you want to say, and that's what they did. So, folks, the Visa card is not the mark of the beast. Then we got another one, 1982. There was a book titled The New Money System 666, in which they said that this, the barcode, you remember this one? The barcode is the mark of the beast. And the reason that they said that is because you see these 2 lines here. I know it's hard to see, but there's 2 lines here, 2 lines in the middle, 2 lines here, and they look a lot like the number 6. They're longer, and they're not exactly 6, and they're not even numbers anyway to begin with. What these numbers do, what these lines do on the end, the middle, and the other end, they tell to the computer that when it sees this, start counting and count up to that one and stop counting there. Then when you see this one, start counting and end when you see that. That's all it is. It's just a code to tell you to count the numbers. The first number is the manufacturer's code. So if you go to the store and you buy a Hershey's bar with almonds, then this first code tells the computer that the product you're buying is a Hershey bar. It doesn't tell it what kind, it just says that Hershey made it. This one tells the computer that it's a chocolate bar with almonds in it, as opposed to a chocolate bar without almonds. So that way they could run their inventory and know how many chocolate bars they sold and how many they still have on the shelf and when it's time to go about ordering more. That's all that is. Now, today, we have those that believe that there's a certain medical procedure out there that if you take it, you've taken the mark of the beast. Or if there's documentation that proves that you've taken this, you've taken the mark of the beast. And that's not the case at all. I simply don't see it that way. I know there's ministers out there that think that way, but I don't see it that way. And that's what I intend to try to prove to you this morning, that you're not going to unknowingly and unwillingly take the mark of the beast. You're going to have to do something in order to get it. And that's what I want to zero in on this morning. Now, in Revelation chapter 13, and you might want to, if you have a Visa card or a Social Security card, you might want to get it out and use it as a bookmarker as we flip back and forth, because we're going to keep coming back here, and those would be handy for that. You can use them for that. In fact, I might just do that myself. Okay, Revelation chapter 13. This chapter presents us with two beasts. Okay, there are two beasts that are mentioned in this. And they are distinct entities, but they're both called beasts. In the first beast is discussed in verses 1 through 10. Let's go ahead and read that. And I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise up out of the sea, having 7 heads and 10 horns, and upon his horns 10 crowns, and upon his heads the name of blasphemy. Now, I'm not going to get into all of this, because if we do, we're going to be here forever. So I just want to prove that what this beast is. And we're not going to spend a lot of time on each little bitty in detail, okay? That's something for another study. Verse 2, and the beast which I saw was like unto a leopard, and his feet were as the feet of a bear, and his mouth as the mouth of a lion, and the dragon gave him his power and his seat and great authority. And I saw one of his heads as it were wounded to death, and his deadly wound was healed, and all the world wondered after the beast. And they worshipped the dragon, which gave power unto the beast, and they worshipped the beast, saying, Who is like unto the beast? Who is able to make war with him? And there was given unto him a mouth speaking great things and blasphemies, and power was given unto him 42 months. And he opened his mouth in blasphemy against God, to blaspheme his name and his tabernacle and them that dwell in heaven. And it was given unto him to make war with the saints and to overcome them, and power was given him over all kindreds and tongues and nations, and all that dwell upon the earth shall worship him, whose names are not written in the book of life of the Lamb slain from the foundation of the world. If any man have an ear, let him hear. He that leadeth into captivity shall go into captivity. He that killeth with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. Okay? So this is this first beast. Now, I want you to turn to Daniel chapter 7. Because remember, the book of Revelation is written in signs and symbols. And if you want to know what the signs and symbols mean, you go back and look in other places to explain them. And this is told, we're told who this beast is and what it is over in the book of Daniel, in the prophecy of Daniel. In Daniel chapter 7, verses 3 through 7, we read, and 4 great beasts came up from the sea. And remember what we saw over in Revelation. I stood upon the sand of the sea and saw a beast rise out of the sea, Okay, so there are four. Now we're only going to concentrate on the first three that Daniel's talking about here. We're not going to worry about the fourth. I'll explain to you what it is. But four great beasts came up from the sea, diverse from one another. The first was like a lion, and had eagle's wings. I beheld till the wings thereof were plucked, and it was lifted up from the earth, and made stand upon the feet of a man, and a man's heart was given to it. And behold, another beast, a second, like to a bear, and it raised up itself on one side, and it had three ribs in the mouth of it, between the teeth of it. And they said thus unto it, Arise, devour much flesh. After this I beheld, and lo, like a leopard, which had upon the back of it four wings of a fowl. The beast had also four heads, and dominion was given unto it. Now you remember in Revelation, we're told that the beast that John saw was like a leopard, and his feet were like the feet of a bear, and his mouth was like the mouth of a lion. And Daniel tells us in reverse order that he sees a lion, and then a bear, and then a leopard. Okay? Why is it in reverse order? Well, because Daniel is standing here looking off into the future, and John is looking into the past. So if you're standing at a street corner and you're looking east and you see three traffic lights and each one of those has a street name, you're going to see the streets in the order that you're looking at them from, right? And if I'm on the other side of them looking back, I see them the opposite direction. So that's what we have here. Whatever these are, Daniel was before them and saw them future. John was after them and saw that was historical. It had already happened. Does that make sense? Okay. Now, if we look at Daniel's chapter 7 again, verses 17 and 18, and I'll tell you what these were. I'm not going to take the time to read all the verses to prove it. I'll just tell you what they were. These were the world empires. The first one, the lion, was Nebuchadnezzar, Babylon. The second one, the bear, was the Medes and the Persians. And the third one, the leopard, was Alexander the Great, the Greeks under Alexander the Great. The fourth one that I didn't read about was Rome. That was the fourth one that was coming. Now over in verses 17 and 18, these great beasts, which are four kings which shall arise out of the earth. These are kingdoms. These are world empires. And that is what the beast in Revelation 13 is, the first one. It is a coming world empire. That's what it will be. That beast is a composite of the prior empires, and it's like the ones that came before. It will have characteristics consistent with prior one world empires. It will be a totalitarian government ruled by one guy. It will have a state religion that's tied to it, as all other world empires have had, and that state religion will be against Christianity. It'll be basically paganism, and Christianity will be its enemy, just like every other world empire that we've ever had before. Now, in the Old Testament days, it wasn't Christianity, it was Judaism, but it was still God's religion, and God's religion was always up against these world empires. It was always the thing that they were against. And then finally, we're told that the dragon, this dragon that gave it great authority, we're told who that is over in Revelation chapter 12 and verse 9. Where it says, and the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole world, and he was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. So the dragon that gives this power, that gives this world empire power and authority, is Satan. This is a demonic, satanic world empire that it ain't here yet, but it will be. Unless it's in some sort of figurative form. But I think you're going to see as we move on that it's not really quite established yet, okay? Now the second beast, which is discussed in verses 11 through 18, is talking about the leader of this world empire. If we look at Revelation 13, verse 18, here is wisdom. Let him that hath understanding count the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. This is a man. It doesn't say it's a number of man, it says a number of a man. And his number is 666. This is a man that claims to be a trinity. 666. That's a trinity. This is a man claiming to be God. That's who we're dealing with. Okay? Now you can call him Antichrist or whatever you want to call him, but this guy is a man that claims to be God. So the first beast is a one world empire under the control of Satan. The second beast is a man and the leader of the one world empire that's under the control of Satan. And if you want to call him Antichrist, man of sin, son of perdition, whatever you want to call him, you can call him that. This answers to the man of sin that we read about over in 2 Thessalonians. And there's some points in here that we're going to want to hang on to. This is a good place to stick the Visa card because we'll be coming back to this one again. 2 Thessalonians chapter 2, verses 1 through 9. Now we beseech you, brethren, by the coming of our Lord Jesus Christ and by our gathering together unto him, that ye be not soon shaken in mind or troubled, neither by spirit, nor by word, nor by letter as from us, as the day of Christ is at hand. Let no man deceive you by any means, for that day shall not come, except that there come a falling away first. And we'll get to that in just a few minutes. And that man of sin be revealed, the son of perdition, who opposeth and exalteth himself above all that is called God or that is worshipped, so that he as God sitteth in the temple of God, showing himself that he is God. Remember ye not that when I was yet with you, I told you these things, and now you know what withholdeth, that he might be revealed in his time. Understand, he will be revealed when it's time for him to be revealed, but not until then. So trying to guess who he is now is a waste of time, because it ain't his time yet. When he's revealed, when it's time, you'll know who he is. For the mystery of iniquity doth already work. Only he who now letteth will let until he be taken out of the way. And then shall that wicked be revealed, whom the Lord shall consume with the spirit of his mouth, and shall destroy with the brightness of his coming, even him whose coming is after the working of Satan with all power and signs and lying wonders. Okay? So this guy that's coming, we're going to see as we continue studying him over in Revelation chapter 13, he matches this dude. Okay? That's who that guy is. Now, we're also told, I shouldn't have closed that, we're also told something interesting that will occur just around the time of the second coming. And this is found over in 1 Thessalonians chapter 5. Verse 1 says, But of the times and seasons, brethren, ye have no need that I write unto you. For yourselves know perfectly that the day of the Lord so cometh as a thief in the night. For when they shall say peace and safety, then sudden destruction cometh upon them as travail upon a woman with child, and they shall not escape. Peace and safety. Let me ask you a question. Is there anybody in this room that believes the world's at peace right now? Anybody in this room that even believes that the United States is at peace right now? Well, I'm going to show how this is going to tie in a few minutes. But that's the hooker as to when things are really going to heat up. When we finally achieve world peace, in the minds of most folks, look out, because that's when trouble starts coming. Now, it is this second beast that we read about that we haven't read about him yet, but in verses 11 through 18. This second beast, the leader of this one world empire, he's the one that causes all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive the mark in their right hand or in their foreheads. He hasn't been revealed yet. So how could you take the mark of the beast if the guy that makes the command to take the mark of the beast isn't here yet? You see, all of these theories, they're putting the cart in front of the horse, as I'm going to continue to show. None of us can name this guy. Anybody in here want to take a shot at who he is? I don't know who he is. I don't. Hadn't been revealed yet. So since we don't know who he is, how in the world could he have issued a decree for us to take something? I haven't heard of anything. Have any of you heard anything like this? No. There's no world leader that's come out and demanded that people do something and take this mark. So it's not a trick, at least if we follow the Bible. Now let's look at Revelation 13, verses 11 through 15, to see something about this guy. Let's get a little bit more detail about him. We'll go ahead and read it, and then I'll make my comments. It's not that long. Verses 11 through 15. And I beheld another beast coming up out of the earth, and he had 2 horns like a lamb, and he spake as a dragon. And he exerciseth all the power of the first beast before him, and causeth the earth and them which dwell therein to worship the first beast, whose deadly wound was healed. And he doeth great wonders, so that he maketh fire come down from heaven on the earth in the sight of men. Remember what we read about over in 2 Thessalonians, about the signs and the wonders and all the rest of that stuff. And he deceiveth them that dwell on the earth by means of those miracles which he had power to do in the sight of the beast, saying to them that dwell on the earth, that they should make an image to the beast, which had the wound by a sword and did live, and he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause as many as would not worship the image of the beast should be killed. Okay? First point, he's got 2 horns as a lamb, but he speaks as a dragon. This clearly is either someone possessed by Satan or one of Satan's minions pretending to be the Lamb of God. Truly Antichrist. Okay? He exercises all the power of the first beast. Why? Because he's the totalitarian ruler, king, monarch, mucky muck, big duck in the puddle, whatever you want to call him, of this world empire. That's how he exercises that. He deceives people by working miracles. Now let me ask you a question. Have any of you seen any world leaders working any miracles lately? Joe Biden, perhaps? Now I'll admit it's a miracle that he can find the podium and speak from it, but this guy doesn't even know what day it is, what year it is, or what office he holds. How about Anthony Fauci? You think? No? Now, he might think he's Jesus Christ, but he hasn't come right out and claimed it yet. We'll have to wait and see. You see, there haven't been any of these world leaders yet. When you start seeing a world leader of a world empire that claims to be Jesus Christ and works miracles, then you can start to sweat. But until then, put it on the back burner. You're not going to run into it. Notice also, he causes everyone to worship the image of the beast. And if you refuse to worship the image of the beast, you get dead. You don't get a mark, you get dead. Okay? Now, the word worship, in every place that it occurs in the book of Revelation, in conjunction with this mark, and we're going to look at most of those verses in a few minutes. In every place, that word is translated from a Greek word, proskuneo, which means to kiss like a dog licking his master's hand, to fawn or crouch, to prostrate oneself in homage, do reverence to, adore, worship. I have actually heard people say that if you do this, I just hit the microphone. If you put your hand over your heart when the flag goes by, or if you say the Pledge of Allegiance, that's not worship, folks. That's not worship at all. Worship is when you get down on your hands and knees and kiss the Pope's ring, or get down and with your face on the floor and bow to an image. That is worship. Okay? And if you don't do that, which, by the way, is against God's commandments, if you don't worship that beast or that image, then you get dead. Okay? You see, you're going to have to do something in order to get this mark. All of this stuff happens before the mark of the beast. We just read down through verse 15. The mark of the beast starts in verse 16. So the mark of the beast does not precede the Antichrist and the final one world empire. The mark of the beast is a product of the Antichrist and the one world empire. And worshiping the image set up by the Antichrist is the prerequisite for receiving the mark of the beast. So you don't have to worry about it being an ATM card or whatever. That's not it. This stuff goes hand in hand. Now let me ask you a question. How can you take the mark of the beast if the beast doesn't yet exist? You can't. And he hadn't been revealed, and no world leader has come out and made these kinds of demands yet. I picture this a lot like what we read about Nebuchadnezzar over in Daniel chapter 3. Daniel chapter 3. We'll look at verses 1 through 7 and then verse 18. Nebuchadnezzar the king made an image of gold, whose height was 80 cubits, and the breadth thereof 6 cubits, and he set it up in the plain of Dura, in the province of Babylon. Then Nebuchadnezzar the king sent to gather together the princes, the governors, the captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all of the rulers of the provinces to come to the dedication of the image which Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. Then the princes, the governors and captains, the judges, the treasurers, the counselors, the sheriffs, and all the rulers of the provinces were gathered together unto the dedication of the image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. They stood before the image that Nebuchadnezzar had set up. Then a herald cried aloud, "To you it is commanded, O people, nations, and languages, that at what time ye hear the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, dulcimer, and all kinds of music, ye fall down and worship the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up. And whoso falleth not down and worshipeth shall the same hour be cast into the midst of a burning fiery furnace. Therefore at that time, when all the people heard the sound of the cornet, flute, harp, sackbut, psaltery, and all kinds of music, all the people, the nations, and the languages fell down and worshiped the golden image that Nebuchadnezzar the king had set up." That was one of the first world empires, and that was the thing that he pulled off. And this looks kind of like what we're dealing with. Now, there were some Jewish kids that didn't refuse to do it because it violates God's commandment. So they would not bow down to it. And their names were Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, and they got tossed into the fiery furnace. And we remember that story. It's over in verse 18. It says, verse 19, I guess it is. Then was Nebuchadnezzar full of fury, and the form of his visage was changed against Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. Therefore he spake and commanded that they should heat the furnace 7 times more than it was wont to be heated, and he tossed them in there. Okay? That's the same kind of thing that we see at the end of time with this Antichrist. Now, I don't know what this image is going to be. I don't have a clue. I just know that there's going to be a commandment out there to do this kind of stuff. And if you don't do it, I don't know if you get tossed into a fiery furnace or if you get a 45 through the skull. I don't know how they do that. Doesn't really matter. But that's what it comes down to. Now, it is after this decree, the one to commit blatant idolatry by bowing to the image, which violates the second commandment. All right? In Exodus chapter 20 and verse 5, it says, "Thou shalt not bow thyself down to them," talking about graven images and idols and such. So that's the commandment not to do it. You're going to have to break that commandment in order to get this mark. So don't be bowing down to idols, and you don't have to worry about it. But notice it's after this. In verse 15, that's when he has this image created. And now look at verse 16. "And he causeth all, both small and great, rich and poor, free and bond, to receive a mark in their right hand or in their foreheads, and that no man might buy or sell, save he had the mark or the name of the beast or the number of his name." So you see the order of how things are going to go? You bow down, you get the mark. You don't bow down, you get dead. Okay? Now, let's look at that a little bit. Look at Revelation chapter 14 and verse 9, and we'll see some of the people that bowed down to it, that got the mark. Revelation 14 and verse 9. "And the third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, If any man worship the beast and his image, and receive his mark in his forehead or in his hand, the same shall drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out without mixture into the cup of his indignation, and he shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb." But notice, you gotta worship to get the mark. Don't worship, you don't get the mark. Look at Revelation chapter 16. Oh, wait. Right where we were. Revelation chapter 14, verse 11. We'll look at that one first. "And the smoke of their torment ascended up forever and ever, and they have no rest day nor night, who worship the beast and his image, and whosoever receiveth the mark of his name." Okay? Hell is reserved for these. The lake of fire is reserved for these people that bow down and worship the image and take the mark. That's why people are afraid of this thing, afraid of getting it accidentally. But you're not going to take it accidentally. You're going to have to do something to earn it. In Revelation chapter 16 and verse 2, "And the first went and poured out his vial upon the earth, and there fell a noisome and grievous sore upon the men which had the mark of the beast, and upon them which worshipped his image." Again, these two go hand in hand. Revelation chapter 19 and verse 20. "And the beast was taken, and with him the false prophet that wrought miracles before him, with which he deceived them that had received the mark of the beast and them that worshipped his image. These both were cast alive into the lake of fire burning with brimstone." So worshiping the beast is how you get the mark. Now, is it an actual physical mark? I don't know. I really don't know. The word that's translated there refers to the type of a mark that you would take if you were a slave. And they used to brand people in the right hand and on their forehead. It may not even be an actual physical mark. It may be something that you're marked with as a result. You're not one of God's children, and you bow down to the image. It could be I don't know. So since I don't know, I'm not going to tell you they're going to stamp 666 on your forehead. I don't know of anybody that has Visa stamped on their forehead either, at least any sane person, but be that as it may. Okay. Now look at Revelation chapter 20, and let's look at the ones that refuse this to bow down. We'll see what happens to them. Revelation 20 and verse 4. And I saw thrones, and they sat upon them, and judgment was given unto them. And I saw the souls of them that were beheaded for the witness of Jesus and for the word of God, and which had not worshipped the beast, neither his image, neither had received his mark upon their foreheads or in their hands, and they lived and reigned with Christ 1,000 years. You see, you got to worship this thing to get that mark. No one on planet Earth has yet issued a decree to bow down to the image of a one world empire set up by an antichrist. Not yet. So that means this stuff is still future. Hadn't happened yet. Now we know a couple of things about the end of time. We know there's going to be a falling away prior to the revelation of the man of sin. We read about that just earlier, right? That day shall not come except there come a falling away, and then the man of sin will be revealed. So we know there will be a falling away. If it turns out, and I'm gonna do something I don't usually do. I remember the first time I heard this, I thought, wow, that's kind of crazy, but it could work. And the more I think about it, the more I think that could work. I'm not preaching it for doctrine, but I'm going to lay it out there for you just in case. It might be something completely different, but if this works out, you'll be able to watch it, and I think you'll see how all the pins fall into place anyway. If it turns out that we see the Schofield Bible start to be fulfilled, we see a Antichrist that's then destroyed. Now, in the Schofield Bible, and in premillennial dispensationalism, they teach that there's one more world empire coming. And then Christ returns and sets up his millennial kingdom. Okay? There's one more coming, and then Christ returns to set up his millennial kingdom. So they see 7 world empires. Okay? Egypt, Assyria, Babylonia, Medo-Persia, Greece, those are the 5 that we're going to see in a minute are fallen. Rome was in power at the time that John wrote, and then a coming world empire after that. Turn over to Revelation chapter 17. We're going to look at verses 8 through 11. So here's their position is, you've got Rome, it falls, then you have a world empire that comes, and then it's not here very long, but then Christ returns and crushes it and starts the millennial kingdom. Okay? Now, watch what the Bible says, because it contradicts what Schofield says. Okay? Revelation chapter 17, verses 8 through 11. The beast that thou sawest, he's talking about that first beast, the world empire. The beast that thou sawest was and is not, and shall ascend out of the bottomless pit and go into perdition. And they that dwell on the earth shall wonder, whose names were not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they behold the beast that was and is not and yet is. And here is the mind which hath wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sitteth. And there are 7 kings. 5 are fallen, one is, and the other is not yet come. And when he cometh, he must continue a short space. That's where Schofield stops. 5 are fallen, right? Egypt, Assyria, Babylonia, Medo, Persia, Greece. 5 are fallen. One is, that's Rome. Because at the time John wrote, Rome was in power, and the other is not yet come, and when he cometh, he shall continue a short space. So Schofield says that's the world empire that's going to have the Antichrist in it, and then Christ is going to return and destroy him. Okay? You hear that in all kinds of fundamentalist churches all over the planet. It's been advertised for years. It's in Hal Lindsey's book. It's everybody knows this. Okay? Now, look at verse 11. And the beast that was and is not, even he is the eighth, and is of the seven, and goeth into perdition. There's 2 more world empires coming, folks, not just one. Now, I think, I can't preach it for doctrine, but I think we're going to see the Schofield Bible start to open itself up, and we're going to have a fake Antichrist out there that's doing the stuff that Schofield says the Antichrist is going to do. And then we're going to have a fake second coming happen that destroys him, and that guy is the one that will be revealed, and he will be the one that demands that people bow down to the image. And he will be the true Antichrist that Christ destroys at his coming. Meanwhile, Schofield has 90% of professing Christendom looking for this Antichrist so that they can run to Jerusalem and bow down to the guy when he shows up. That's why I'm so against that thing. It's absolutely demonic. So if that happens, if we see something like this, and we see a Christ return that has long, light brown hair and green eyes and looks like the picture that you see in all the Catholic churches, and he shows up and demands that the people worship him and bow down, be careful. I remember the first time I heard this from Elder Mott. I use it over and over and over again. If that happens, and if you think it's a second coming and your feet haven't left the ground, it's not him, it's a fake. And there is warning after warning after warning by Christ and the apostles, let no man deceive you by any means. That he's in the desert, or he's here, or he's there, or he's somewhere else. When he returns, you're going to know it. Everybody's going to see it. It's going to be visible. The whole world is going to spot this one. It's not just going to be on CNN and MSNBC. It's going to be everywhere, because at the time he returns, this planet is no longer. So don't fall for something like that. Now, we know that there will be some faithful Christians left at the time of the second coming. We don't know how many, but we do know there will be some. In Matthew chapter 24, verses 37 through 39. Matthew 24, 37. But as in the days of Noah were, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in the days that were before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day that Noah entered into the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them all away, so shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Now I want you to compare this with 1 Peter chapter 3 and verse 20. 1 Peter 3:20. Which sometime were disobedient, when once the long suffering of God waited in the days of Noah, while the ark was a preparing, wherein few, that is 8 souls, were saved by water. So if at the coming of the Son of Man, it's like in the days of Noah, there's not going to be a lot of Christians left. I don't know how many there will be, but it's not going to be and remember, we got that great falling away. Can you picture this one? If you grew up in a church, and you might be one of God's children, but you don't really know the truth, and you grow up in one of these churches, one of these pre-milled churches, and you see what I described to you, and you run off to worship this guy, probably not going to make it very far, are you? Okay, 2 Peter also. Let's look at this. 2 Peter chapter 2 and verse 5. And spared not the old world, but saved Noah, the eighth person, a preacher of righteousness, bringing in the flood upon the world of the ungodly. How about that? We got a preacher and a couple other people left on planet Earth before the flood. You remember my argument that there will be a church somewhere on planet Earth all the way up until the time that Christ returns? That's one of the reasons that I say that, because it's going to be like it was in the days of Noah, where you had a preacher and a few people there. And that's how it'll be at the second coming. You know, Christ even asked rhetorically, if when the Son of Man cometh, shall he find faith on the earth? Over in Luke 18 and verse 8. And obviously, the answer is no. There's not going to be a lot. Why? Because the ones that didn't bow down to the image got whacked. Only the few that were hidden out somewhere that they didn't get to will be the ones that are still here. Now, we also know that shortly before the second coming, Satan will be loosed to go out and deceive the nations and make war against Christ and his church. Revelation chapter 20, verses 7 through 10. And when the 1,000 years are expired, Satan shall be loosed out of his prison, and shall go out to deceive the nations which are in the four quarters of the earth, Gog and Magog, to gather them together to battle, the number of whom is as the sand of the sea. And they went up on the breadth of the earth and compassed the camp of the saints about, and the beloved city, and fire came down from God out of heaven and devoured them. The camp of the saints. What's a camp? It's a temporary place where people hang out for a while. Well, that's us. That's the church. He's coming for the church. And he will finally get to the point to where he thinks he's got it, and just before he can wipe out the entire church, Christ returns. Raptures those few children that are still here, those that are alive and remaining, and destroys the devil. Look at 1 Thessalonians chapter 4. Verses 15 through 18. Let's go back a little. Go back to verse 13. What Paul was dealing with here, he was dealing with the idea that some of these Thessalonians had gotten in their head that if you died before Christ returned, then you were just lost. You're just gone. You just rot in the grave, and that's it, and it's over with. Kind of like, I think Jehovah's Witnesses teach that same kind of a doctrinal position, that if you're not alive at the time, then you're not one of them. Which means Abraham wasn't one of them, and that doesn't make a lot of sense, but that's what they thought. He says, beginning here at verse 13, "But I would not have you to be ignorant, brethren, concerning them which are asleep, that you sorrow not, even as others which have no hope. For if we believe that Jesus died and rose again, even so them also which sleep in Jesus will God bring with him. For this we say unto you by the word of the Lord, that we which are alive and remain unto the coming of the Lord shall not prevent or precede them which are asleep. For the Lord himself shall descend from heaven with a shout, with the voice of the archangel, and with the trump of God, and the dead in Christ shall rise first. Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with him in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air, and so shall we ever be with the Lord." Okay? Look also at 1 Corinthians chapter 15, verses 51 and 52. 1 Corinthians 15, 51 and 52. Behold, I show you a mystery. We shall not all sleep, but we shall all be changed. In a moment, in the twinkling of an eye, at the last trump, for the trumpet shall sound, and the dead shall be raised incorruptible, and we shall be changed. So there will be some, maybe not a lot, but there will be some. And if I'm correct, the mark of the beast doesn't show up until the very end of time, when Satan's man, claiming to be Jesus Christ, demands the world to worship him and take his mark or be killed. We think of the 5 I wills of Satan over in Isaiah. Chapter 14. Isaiah 14, beginning at verse 12. How art thou fallen from heaven, O Lucifer, son of the morning? How art thou cut down to the ground, which did weaken the nations? For thou hast said in thine heart, I will ascend into heaven. I will exalt my throne above the stars of God. I will sit also upon the mount of the congregation in the sides of the north. That's earthly Jerusalem, folks. I will ascend above the heights of the clouds. I will be like the Most High. He wants the world to worship him, and he'll do it under the threat of death. And if you don't bow down, well, there'll be a few that escape this. I don't know how many, but there will be some. Now, you say, well, I don't know if I'm strong enough to refuse. I mean, if this happens, I don't know that I'm going to be able to. I mean, you know, if somebody comes up and puts a gun up against your head and says, renounce Christ or die, are you strong enough to do it? I don't know. Hadn't happened yet. Right? I don't want you to worry about that. I really don't want you to worry about that. Because God is faithful, who will not suffer you to be tempted above that ye are able, but will with the temptation also make a way to escape, that you may be able to bear it. That's 1 Corinthians chapter 10 and verse 13. Don't concern yourself with that stuff. You might be one of the ones that gets raptured at the end of time, that he keeps hidden. You might be someone that passes away before any of this ever happens anyway, and you don't have to face it. But don't worry about it. Don't let that trouble you. So rest assured that if you are one of God's elect children, if your name is written in the Lamb's Book of Life from the foundation of the world, you cannot ever be eternally lost, ever. You can't be. If you're one of his children, you are safe. Look at John chapter 10. Verses 27 through 30. Jesus says, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me, and I give unto them eternal life, and they shall never perish, neither shall any man pluck them out of my hand. My Father which gave them me is greater than all, and no man is able to pluck them out of my Father's hand. I and my Father are one. No man can pluck you out of his hand. That includes you. You're a man too. You can't even pluck yourself out of God's hand. If you're one of his children, you got nothing to worry about, folks. So, look at Romans chapter 8. Don't get caught up in this stuff, worrying about what might be the mark of the beast or accidentally may taken the mark of the beast or any of that kind of stuff. You'll know it when you see it. And if you're a child of God, you're as safe as you could possibly be from this. In Romans 8, verses 28 through 39, Paul says, and we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are all the called, according to his purpose. For whom he did foreknow, he also did predestinate to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brethren. Moreover, whom he did predestinate, them he also called, and whom he called, them he also justified, and whom he justified, them he also glorified. What shall we say to these things? If God be for us, who can be against us? He that spared not his own Son, but delivered him up for us all, how shall he not with him also freely give us all things? Who shall lay anything to the charge of God's elect? It is God that justifieth. Who is he that condemneth? It is Christ that died, yea, rather that is risen again, who is even at the right hand of God, who also maketh intercession for us. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation, or distress, or persecution, or famine, or nakedness, or peril, or sword? As it is written, for thy sake we are killed all the day, we are counted as sheep for the slaughter. Nay, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him that loved us. For I am persuaded that neither death, nor life, nor angels, nor principalities, nor powers, nor things present, nor things to come, nor height, nor depth, nor any other creature shall be able to separate us from the love of God, which is in Christ Jesus our Lord. If you are one of his children, you got nothing to worry about. Nothing can separate you from that. Nothing can cost you your eternal salvation. If you're his child, you're as safe as you can possibly be. And so this morning I want to close with the words of Paul, where he was discussing the second coming over in 1 Thessalonians 4. I didn't read this verse just a minute ago. I'm going to read it now. Wherefore, comfort one another with these words. And I hope this brings you some comfort so that you don't have to spend any time worrying about this stupid mark of the beast stuff. With that, I thank you for your very kind and patient attention. Let's stand and be dismissed in prayer.